Moving across town? You've got pretty much everything packed up except that couch. What are you going to do with it? It's in perfectly good condition, so it shouldn't just end up on the street. Donate it to St. Vinny's. Your pre-loved goods donated to St. Vinny's thrift stores stay right here in Dane County. Call St. Vinny's at 608-278-2920 extension 1 to schedule your free home pickup today. Want to save some time and money today? Order your next meal from Eat Street. Eat Street was founded right here in Madison and still operates locally. They're focused on local. Most of their orders, 85%, go to family-run restaurants. And now you can earn up to 5% Eat Street cash back only in Madison. Plus, get 15% off your next Madison order with the code CITYCAST. That's one word, not case sensitive, through May. Today on CityCast Madison. Are we witnessing the end of the Wisconsin Humanities? The Trump administration's new acting chair of the National Endowment for the Humanities announced earlier this month that they would be cutting all NEH funding to states, which effectively guts our state agency. We sat down with Communications Director of Wisconsin Humanities, Jessica Becker, to ask her about this elimination and how it might impact our state's communities and cultural organizations. It's Monday, April 21st. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about. Before we dive into today's show, we've got some important news. We're kicking off our spring membership campaign today, including a fresh name that we think reflects our members' dedication to Madison. CityCast members are now CityCast neighbors. We believe that better neighbors make better cities, and the people who support the show really embody this. We're also expanding membership benefits. CityCast Madison neighbors will continue to have access to ad-free listening and an exclusive weekly events look-ahead email. But you'll also get invitations to upcoming neighbors-only events and the opportunity to submit local businesses and organizations you love to be featured on the show and in the Madison Minutes newsletter. I'm particularly excited about doing events because it's always so great to connect with you in person. We actually are having a membership event soon. We're doing our first ever CityCast Madison Neighbors event this month. If you're a member, check your email for details. For those of you who aren't members yet, don't you want to be? To learn more about what it means to be a CityCast Madison neighbor, visit membership.citycast.fm. As a special thank you, anyone who becomes a CityCast Madison neighbor during our spring campaign will get a neighbor-exclusive coffee mug. They're very diner aesthetic chic, so don't miss out on those. See the full list of benefits and sign up to become a better neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. All right, now on to the show. Hi, Jessica.
Hi.
So earlier this month, the National Endowment for the Humanities canceled grant funds that support operation costs for Wisconsin Humanities for the past 50 plus years. Jessica, first of all, I can only imagine how tough this moment is, and I appreciate you deeply for making the space to inform us during this difficult time, for real.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So as much as you can you help us understand how did this decision come down? Like, what's happened here?
Yeah, it is a strange sort of tale that I imagine one day will be a very good Hollywood movie. So the NEH is this federal funding that was mandated by Congress in the 60s, signed into law, presented as an act from Lyndon B. Johnson in the 1965, actually. And the NEH is a big federal agency, but in the 70s, they realized that in order for the humanities to be really and truly for everyone, it would work better at a state level. And so state offices were mandated by Congress, and every state and territory has a state office. Wisconsin Humanities serves that role in Wisconsin. And so that federal funding has been there since the beginning and has been appropriated by Congress and in every congressional budget. And we just had a continuing resolution that was signed by President Trump. And that continuing resolution had money for the state operations of the NEH. And then on April 2nd, an email came in the night to the directors of the state offices that said effective immediately those state grants were suspended, were done, were cut. And so that is how it happened. And so it's been kind of a whirlwind ever since as we try to figure out how to continue, because while the office is still here and while we're still here, the money is no longer here. And so that's serious for Wisconsin. We literally had to be in touch with recipients of our grants, because what we do is we re-grant that federal money to communities all over Wisconsin. We've had a grant program since the beginning. And we had to let grant recipients know in communities, big and small, all over the state, that suddenly the money isn't there anymore.
And can we take a step back for those who aren't familiar? What is the Wisconsin Humanities? You talked about, how it was set up, but can you give us a little bit more information about what y'all do?
Wisconsin Humanities is a nonprofit, an independent agency that exists and has existed since 1972 in some really basic way to be the funnel or the pass-through for that federal funding from the NEH. So initially, the rationale for the state offices of the NEH was because the humanities belong to all of us. We all need to be sort of educated and informed and wise citizens of a democracy. And so again, that's why state agencies independently use that money in what ways make sense in those states. And so Wisconsin Humanities is an independent nonprofit. Our budget is, for the most part, coming from those operational grants from the NEH. Every state runs differently. Every state runs their office differently. We all do fundraising, and some states receive a lot of money from their state as well. Now, Wisconsin does not. We receive a very small percentage of money from our state. So while we get 89% of our funds from the NEH, we only get 7% of our funds from the state, which is a small number. And that's part of the reason that when you see those lists about funding per capita for arts and humanities in every state in the country, Wisconsin is dead last. We are 50th in the nation for state funding per person.
Wow. I just want to repeat that we are the 50th state. That's a big one.
That's a big one. And it's a big part of the story right now, right? Because when the federal money gets pulled away, then we have no backup. We have no support locally. And the real problem, if you'll let me go on and on here, the real problem with that is that what we do is we give that money out around the state through our grant program and our other programs. And so when we can't do that, then there's no pipeline. There's no way for that federal money to come to the state. And
can you give us some examples of like what those key grants are and programs that are receiving that money from you all?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you asked, because I know I skipped over what are the humanities, which is a question that is probably...
That was coming up next.
Yeah,
if we want
absolutely.
to start there, because the humanities itself, it's not that well understood for those of us who took a humanities course in maybe high school or college and haven't thought about it in a while. Like, what are the humanities? And we'll come back to your key programs.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll try and say it all together, because I think the programs help to explain what the public humanities are. Why don't we understand what the humanities are? And part of it is that it's because it's inherent to being human. And so the things that we do when we ask big questions that look to our history to better understand how we got where we are, the big questions that bring us together around issues that we're grappling with as communities, when we ask big questions about how we want our future to go, everything is part of it, including how decisions are made about the economy, how science plays out for people in their lives, how technology plays out for people in their lives. All those big questions, that's the humanities. And so that word human being in there kind of was, I don't know how it became the humanities as a word, but it's all the things that humans do to make sense of the world. So it's really big, actually. In fact, the arts falls under the humanities because that's, of course, how you express creatively those questions, how you bring it to life through artwork and plays and stuff. But the humanities are the bigger questions. So it's kind of everything. And so when you ask about what our programs are, we're looking at things that are happening in museums, in schools, in libraries, and groups in communities all over the state that have questions like, how do we want to redevelop our main street? What do we want to do with this historical architecture? How do we want people to better understand the different communities, histories that are living next to each other? Everything from, what was the agricultural history of this part of the state to, how much AI is good for people. Those types of things turn into programs, right? Really cool programs. And so that's what the public humanities is.
Yeah, I know that our producer, Jade Isiri Ramos, also produced a podcast with you called Human Powered, which is this fantastic place to hear storytelling on how Wisconsin Humanities Grants impacts Wisconsinites across the state. So folks can go and see that. But that sort of storytelling is huge. And I'm glad that we're touching on, why is it important? How does it impact daily life? Dare I quote Dead Poets Society and start thinking about letters and science. And on the letters end, the quote is, "We don't read and write poetry because it's cute. We read and write poetry because we are members of the human race. And the human race is filled with passion. And medicine, law, business, engineering, these are noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for."
Thank you. Thank you. That's it.
That's it. And I studied at UW-Madison, and I was a part of the Letters and Science School. And it's the letters are paired with science because you want to think about how you're applying science. If you're going to be looking at atomic bombs, doing something in a neighborhood, how is it going to impact the humans and how are people living in those spaces? Like AI is a perfect example of that. How we develop AI, where are we going to go with it? We're going to need the humanities to understand that and understand so much. So I'm glad that we established that, and it's been established as something valuable in the state for, over 5 decades, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just really quick, you bring up these bigger questions, and that's why the Congress and the president in 1965 decided that this was important, is because that was the 60s were a time of great turmoil, great change. A lot was happening, just like today. People had big questions. There were new weapons that had been designed. There was the civil rights. There was a lot of things that were sort of destabilizing everyone's understanding of what the future could be like. And we realized we needed the humanities to bring us together and that everyone deserved access to those types of programs. And so that's an important piece of what the Wisconsin Humanities does, is it makes that access real. And our programs are free. Our programs are all over the state. And to some extent, you don't know what you have until it's gone, right?
No, it's a devastating thought and reality that, I'm sure has caught you by surprise, as everyone else who's a part of Wisconsin Humanities and many folks in the community that rely on the work. With this stop order in place, we've heard that grants are stopping. You're informing recipients. In terms of the programs you mentioned, is the funding just gone? What about staff? What is the funding situation looking like?
All of our programs have to stop. I should be very clear about that. We have to stop everything. And all staff will be laid off, and our offices will be going into hibernation, which effectively means closing. And we have a program that is really, it's so tragic. It's a nationally award-winning public humanities training that is very popular. We have an overwhelming number of applicants, and 8 were just selected. These applicants come to us for a full year, and they're coming because they are passionate about what is happening in their communities, and they want to learn skills to do better work. Like, we want to explore our community history, or we want to build a community garden, or we want to create a podcast that brings people together, or whatever it is. They have these ideas. They are community leaders, and we provide training for 6 months and then seed funds for them to invest back in their community with whatever ideas make sense to them. So we just selected 8 fellows who now are not going to get to do that program, are not going to get that training. It's very unique. It's the only opportunity that exists of this nature. And that's ending, as is Love Wisconsin, which is a digital storytelling sharing program that's been around for 10 years. We've got over 300 stories. We say it's, how neighbors can meet one another, but it's a digital environment, a digital community that researchers have shown. They actually went in and studied the Love Wisconsin digital community because they wanted to know, why is this such a positive online space? What makes this place different? And we're sharing real, authentic stories, how people want to share their story in their own words. And there's over 100,000 followers, and it's a place the researchers showed. They looked at the reactions and the responses and how people were engaging, and it's overwhelmingly positive. It's a place where people develop empathy and compassion and get to know each other across difference. That will end. And as I said already, the grant program will end. We have another program that is for schools and youth to learn. It's called Stand Up to Hate. And it's about sort of preparing for the inevitable issues that come up in communities around bias and racism and hate and violence, unfortunately. And that's a curriculum that, that's our program. These things can't go on without funding. And we're shutting our doors and hoping for the best. So we're calling it hibernation, but literally all 8 staff are being laid off.
Yes, your mom wants you to call her. This Mother's Day, give her a call and give her an Aura digital picture frame. My sister lives 2,000 miles away, and I often miss her when I'm out doing something fun that she'd love. I have this photo of us roller skating on the boardwalk by Santa Monica Pier, and every time I see it, I feel the joy of that moment trying to skate and look cool. Aura Frames was named the best digital photo frame by Wirecutter and featured in 495 gift guides last year. So the next time you need to call your mom, you can also send her a new pic of you from that trip you're telling her about right from your phone. Aura has a great deal for Mother's Day. For a limited time, listeners can save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off plus free shipping on their best-selling Carver matte frame. That's auraframes.com, promo code CityCast. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply.
What sort of promises have you made to yourself this year? Getting in better shape, eating healthier, saving more money, traveling somewhere new? What about discovering a new culture by learning a new language? With Babbel, you can do that in just a few weeks. I'm David Plotz, the CEO of CityCast, and I've been learning Spanish with Babbel. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons, handcrafted by over 200 language experts, get you to begin speaking your new language in 3 weeks or whatever pace you choose. And because conversing is the key to really understanding each other in new languages, Babbel is designed using practical, real-world conversations. The Spanish I learned on Babbel really helped me on a recent trip to Mexico City, ordering in restaurants, shopping at the textile market, cheering on at the Lucha Libre, and I've been keeping it up since I got home. You're a podcast listener. I know that because you're listening here. I bet you'll love Babbel's new podcasts. On Eavesdrop in Espanol, which I listen to, you get to listen to a real conversation, then have the teacher host explain back to you. Then you listen again and catch everything. And you can even read along in the transcript. It's a really fun and effective way to learn. Let's get more of you talking in a new language. Babbel is gifting CityCast listeners 60% off subscriptions at babbel.com/CityCast. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/CityCast. Spelled BABBEL.com/CityCast. Babbel.com/CityCast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Hey, it's your host, Bianca, popping in to tell you about our new CityCast Madison Neighbors program. I know you've heard us talk about membership before, and many of you are already part of it. Well, it's got a new name. We're calling it CityCast Madison Neighbors because we've learned that people who support CityCast Madison are people who care deeply about the city and want to make it better. They're just the kind of neighbors this city needs. We're also adding benefits. CityCast Madison neighbors still have access to ad-free podcast listening and an exclusive weekly local events preview. But now you also get regular events like happy hours with other CityCast Madison neighbors, local volunteering meetups, and other members-only events where we explore and better our city together. And you get to shout out a local business or nonprofit you love on the show and in the Madison Minutes newsletter. For $10 a month, you can become a CityCast Madison neighbor today by going to membership.citycast.fm. That's membership.citycast.fm. We couldn't make the show without people like you supporting it, and we're so excited for you to be a part of it. Thanks a million. When you think about the humanities, history is a huge piece of the humanities and the work that you all do. And it feels like, the work of keeping our histories of our state is a bipartisan issue, that's something that has enjoyed bipartisan support. I know as an artsy person myself, the arts have always, had a little bit of a tougher go, but history, there's something to grab onto there. And this is pulling the rug out from all of that work for our state.
Yeah, and we're coming up on a big anniversary. We're coming up on the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And there is actually a lot of programming and funding that was going into planning for that. And, this is something that's important in our country. We know that there are examples around the world where governments have decided that certain histories don't matter or that it have erased histories. And unfortunately, that's happened in this country as well. There's examples of fear-based erasure of history or changing history. We can unfortunately think of Native American history, stories, sciences that there was an attempt to erase. So we know this happens. It's just amazing that it's happening right now.
In 2025. Yeah. Also just seeing, from federal websites and military websites, figures of who have been honored and have online pages for them, like Colin Powell or different, I can't think of any other names at the moment, but women military leaders have been being disappeared, they're being taken off the internet. So it's just a really unsettling time. And, as we've hammered the point in, this organization that you're part of has had support for 50 years for the arts, culture, and storytelling. What can y'all do, or what's being done to preserve all of this materials and history that you've gathered up to this point?
Yeah. Well, I do think that that's why this question of history matters, right? Is because we've been the keeper of a lot of stories, and the infrastructure of the organization being 53 years old, we have a responsibility to Wisconsin. And that's what we're trying to figure out right now. Still unfolding. It's unprecedented. How do you shut down an agency that has a 53-year-old history that is the state's history? And so what we're trying to do is plot that out as systematically as possible. We have a wonderful board of volunteers. Our board of volunteers come from around the state, always have. Our board represents Wisconsin. And so we're working with our board to do the best that we can under the circumstances. But yeah, the programs themselves, that's about sort of in the moment what we're losing. But the history of Wisconsin, that's a bigger question, and we're trying to figure that out.
So are these archival materials that, need to have a home? And
for example, the state's sesquicentennial was an anniversary that we were part of celebrating, where we did receive funds to redistribute for programs that celebrated the state's sesquicentennial. Another example, the Wisconsin Book Festival. We founded the Wisconsin Book Festival. Now it is beautifully run by the Madison Library Foundation, but we've got the archives for those first 11 years of the Wisconsin Book Festival. Love Wisconsin, as I mentioned, 10 years worth of stories. So all of those things, yeah, those are real archives. That's real history. Not to mention, as I said, we have 53 years worth of grants that have been given out, and all of those, they often end up in products or programs that, we have the results of, files and files and files. So, yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, laughing not to cry. Jessica, what now? What's the next step?
Yeah, well, I hope that people stay abreast of this story and stay tuned in because what's next I can't answer immediately. But as I've said, we're trying really hard to prepare for the future that could be brighter, meaning we know that history is a bipartisan issue, that culture is something that we all have. Culture. We all care about our history and our culture and our stories and our place. And so we believe that this is not the end, but instead are preparing for a time when we can reopen the opportunity to bring those federal dollars back to Wisconsin. But we have to do that in a responsible way. So that's what we're working on. So we've been using the word hibernation because we hope that it's more hopeful than anything else. All of us here in Wisconsin know what winter is like. So perhaps we're going through a winter and we're trying to figure out how to make it such that we can bloom again when we're given that opportunity. But it's very complicated in the sense that nobody knows how to do this. And this was not done in a way that provided the time or the resources to do things properly. And so everybody's scrambling. It's not ideal circumstances to close down an organization. So please stay tuned. We hope that we can give more information about how we're going to go forward. It is going to take funding. We are going to need some angels to help maintain that hibernation period. And so we hope to have more information about that soon. So WisconsinHumanities.org is our website, and we're trying to keep some of the latest information there, and we'll have opportunities to support us as we go into hibernation. And we have the press release and the talking points and all of that stuff there, as well as information about our actual impact around the state. And that could be a good place to start. Sign up for our newsletter.
Yeah, and I guess I'm curious at this point if this gutting is even legal, because my understanding is that Congress passed a budget and the President of the United States signed it, which included funding for this. And so is there any legal challenges or anything that can be done besides kind of shutting down or hibernating, as you've expressed?
I'm not a lawyer, but I think we all understand that it's not legal. And that the question now is about how that case is made. All 50 states and 6 territories, so 56 offices, are struggling with this same issue. The Federation for State Humanities Councils is our organizer in the sense that we all work through the Federation for State Humanities Councils, and we are working to figure out what the best move is. And the legality of the situation is certainly under question. I think it's important to make sure that people understand that when that federal money comes to Wisconsin, it's what leverages other money. So when the grants are given out, we know that in 2024, they were matched 4-1 with local money, local support. And so that federal money leverages the philanthropic gifts and the community gifts and the local support. And so part of the argument that people make for these cuts is that this isn't what federal money should be doing. Why are my taxes paying for this? Why is federal money coming to Wisconsin? Or is this really what the federal government should be doing? Without recognizing that it is the seed that makes these other things happen. So that federal support leverages the private funding and the community funding.
And, before we go, we're talking about the humanities. We've talked about the Human Powered podcast. You and everyone working at the Wisconsin Humanities are people and have lives. And this reality is just so unsettling, at least from where I'm sitting. How are you and your colleagues doing?
Well, thank you for asking on a personal level. It is something none of us have ever been through before. We are all very destabilized by the suddenness of it. And, it's not just us is the problem, right? We're in a moment when we don't really understand what the ramifications are going to be. And so, while we know that this is It's not good for our state. We're all, I think, very concerned about what it means for our country to have this attack being made on organizations whose mission it is to build bridges between people. It's an attack on organizations that function responsibly, that have complied to all of our responsibilities for that federal funding. And, we have small budgets. It's not a big portion of the congressional budget, let's just say. We are all working with little money, and we have done incredible work to bring people together during times that I believe we all feel are very in need of that kind of work. We need more ways to better understand each other. We're looking for ways to come together and feel like the divisiveness and the fear can be overcome. And that's the mission of every state Humanities Council. And so it feels bigger than just ourselves personally. Speaking for myself as one of 8 employees, we're very upset for our organization, but it's a bigger question for what's happening in the country. So that's very unsettling.
Well, Jessica, we here on CityCast Madison celebrate your work. Know that it is valuable, and we celebrate everything that you've already accomplished. And I just want to laud you for coming on and being courageous and sharing the story and informing us on what's happening, and hope that people hear the call.
Thank you.
That was Jessica Becker, Communications Director for the Wisconsin Humanities. If you want to help out Wisconsin Humanities or go appreciate their work telling Wisconsin's histories and stories, head to our show notes for a link. And don't forget, now is the time to join the CityCast Madison Neighbors program. You'll get access to ad-free listening, our weekly events newsletter, and exclusive event invites. So what are you waiting for? Won't you be my neighbor? There's never been a better time than now. That's all for today, here on CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin, your host. If you enjoyed the show, why not share this episode with any dreamers, artists, or visionaries in your life? All right, we'll be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Until then, go watch Dead Poets Society and support the local arts.